And good Sunday evening, guys. This is the PalmettoPreps podcast, a late edition. I got in at about 1:30 a.m. on Saturday morning from Friday night. Long day for me on Friday. I had my first broadcast with WRHI in Rock Hill. We did the Abbeville-Andrew Jackson second-round game in the Class 2A playoffs. Boy, oh boy, Abbeville's good. We're going to get to that here in a minute. But yesterday I just rested all day, and I knew I would eventually do a podcast, and here we are. So I'm going to get into some of the scores, some of the things that jumped out to me. Pardon me, few surprises. There will be some coughs. Few surprises, not a whole lot. And then we'll kind of briefly look ahead to the matchups this coming Friday night. Now, of course, there is one game that did not take place this past Friday, and I would love to know the reasoning why. I don't want to go on a rant here. I don't want to blame anybody because I don't know where the blame is to go. But the fact that Goose Creek and Somerville is not being played until Monday night is absolutely ridiculous. You cannot give me a rhyme or reason why it makes sense to play this game on a Monday, and the winner will have, 3 days to prepare for Carolina Forest in the 5A playoffs? Listen, you're a 5A school. You should have the facilities at a 5A school to not have wet fields, I think I heard, for Goose Creek. I mean, that's ridiculous. Again, I'm not blaming anybody, but I don't understand why that game hasn't been played yet, and it's not going to be played until Monday. So Goose Creek and Somerville is the only game that didn't get played. That will be on Monday night, so we will not be able to talk about that one. Let's start in 5A. No surprise that Burns goes up to Lawrence and smacks them 41-12. You know, Lawrence had a great season, but that region was not as competitive as, of course, Burns region is and other regions in 5A. But Lawrence, listen, had a fantastic dream season, one of their best years in school history for Lawrence. But Burns is the playoff-savvy team and probably a slight edge to the coach with Reggie Shaw there. He's got his guys, got his system in place, and Burns is primed for a good run here as they're now in the third round of the playoffs. The big shocker, I guess, for some people, others said not so much. There's a lot to dive into this game with Sumter and Gaffney. Gaffney got the win over Sumter 33-7. You know, I told you guys all week that Sumter was one of the biggest teams that I've seen up front. I also told you that they weren't as disciplined as other teams that I had seen. They do have the Division I talent all over the field. They've got South Carolina Division I commit, O'Donnell Fortune in the defensive backfield. They've got a defensive end that just got offered by South Carolina, and they have a linebacker that's getting looks from South Carolina State, who I thought was the best player on their defense when I saw him. And then, of course, on offense, you've got a Charleston Southern commit, the backup running back, visited South Carolina a couple weeks ago. He's getting Division I Power 5 interest. Then, of course, you have the wide receiver who is the best receiver I saw all year, Tylee Kraft, who's going to North Carolina Chapel Hill. Saying all that, you know, all those stats and all those numbers don't mean a damn thing if you are not disciplined and don't win the game. And Gaffney was just better on Friday night. Gaffney is one of those teams. All due respect to Sumter, all due respect to some of the teams that we'll talk about. Gaffney is one of those teams. They're in that grouping with a Fairfield. They're in that grouping. I'll go Marlborough County. I'll go Sherrall on this one. They're in that grouping where it doesn't matter if they're a 1, 2, 3, or a 4 seed. They're going to be a tough out in the playoffs because Gaffney has that proud traditional history of being a tough out and making deep runs in the postseason. Gaffney went on the road and knocked off Rock Hill. They then went on the road and knocked off Sumter. They got all that confidence from beating Rock Hill that it carried over into the win over the Sumter Gamecocks on Friday night. Now, Sumter, they've had problems with penalties. They've had problems with turnovers. And I also said one of the slight disadvantages that they have, or the slight knocks that Sumter has, they don't have as good of quarterback play as other teams might have when you get to this point in the season. I still think that Sumter QB is talented, but he wasn't a guy that I thought would be able to make plays when the game was on the line. This was not the case. Gaffney just dominated Sumter. They just dominated. I think they jumped out to a 27-0 lead there in the first half and into the third quarter. Gaffney just dominated up front, all sides of the ball, and took advantage of this one. So that sets up Burns and Gaffney. Oh, two big-time rivals in 5A going at it this Friday night. That will be at Burns. Finishing out the rest of 5A in the upper state, Dorman knocked off Spring Valley 49-0. Not surprised here. I thought Spring Valley might put up some points there, but this was a tough test for that sophomore quarterback, DeQuandre Smith, who I think is in 2 years going to be a Mr. Football candidate. I've said that publicly, and I'm going to stick with that. I just think that kid's talented. A little surprised that they didn't score at all, that it was a shutout, but that just shows you how good Dorman is. That just shows you how strong Dave Gutshaw and those boys are in the upstate over at Dorman U out in Roebuck, South Carolina. Also in 5A, the dream season continues for the Clover Blue Eagles. The best season in school history keeps rolling on as Clover knocks off Malden 58-31. Clover will now play host to Dorman. That's interesting. Clover does not have to go on the road, but they will host Dorman. Now, I know the knock on Clover is that they got a really good draw in the postseason and that their region was down. Their region consisting, of course, the Northwesterns and the Rock Hills. They have seen better years, but Clover took advantage of that, and Clover is going to get to host a big-time playoff game with Dorman. Should be a great atmosphere on that side of Rock Hill there, the Rock Hill area. All right, let's go to the lower state. Dutch Fork handled Wando. Dutch Fork will now travel to Fort Dorchester, who defeated Berkeley. Dutch Fork and Fort Dorchester have had a storied history here the last 3-4 years, maybe even dating back further than that in the postseason. And Dutch Fork has had the number of Fort Dorchester here. Tom Knotts has had the number of LaPrade, I believe, down there at Fort Dorchester. And this is interesting, though, because it's in Fort D. We'll see just how good this Dutch Fork team is yet again as they will go on the road. They had to go on the road last year in the playoffs, and we're going to have to see them do it again. So if Dutch Fork is going to defend their 5A state title, they're going to have to be the Road Warriors and do it in Fort D. Carolina Forest over River Bluff 36-25. This was a good win for Carolina Forest. I know Carolina Forest, the knock has been their defense. Mason Garcia is an East Carolina commit. He's at quarterback. They can score points. They scored 42 in the first round, 36 against River Bluff. But the knock all year has been their defense. Can they stop you and keep that game from becoming a shootout? You like it if it's a shootout because you have the QB. But Carolina Forest did a good job. I know Braden Walker still had over 100 yards rushing, but Carolina Forest did a good job of playing a bend but don't break type defense, if you will. And now Carolina Forest will play host to the winner of Goose Creek and Somerville, and they will have them on a short rest because Goose Creek and Somerville will play on Monday night. All right, so let's go to 4A. Greenville's kind of been under the radar. I feel like no one's talking about Greenville. Of course, they were number 1 seed. Handled Palmetto in the first round, then handled Belton Honey. Well, can't say handled. They got by BHP. They beat Belton Honey and Pat 24-21. BHP is one of those teams, in my opinion, like Gaffney. Doesn't matter if they're a 2, 3, or a 4 seed. They're still going to be a tough out in the postseason because they're a perennial playoff team that makes runs and play in a tough region. But Greenville gets by BHP, and now they will play Wren, which Wren puts up a lot of points. This could be a shootout here in Greenville. So Greenville and Wren doing battle this Friday night. Pardon me. D.W. Daniel just got past Westwood. The Road Warriors, the Red Hawks. Oh, man, they almost did it again. Westwood had first and goal, and all 4 cracks at it, could not punch it in. And they would have taken the lead if they would have scored on the play. Could not do it. Daniel survives 27-22. Let me tell you something. Coach Quinn over there at Westwood has done a phenomenal job in his first year. He took the place of Dustin Curtis, who's done a great job himself at AC Flora. We'll get to him in a minute. But Coach Quinn has done a great job. That was a really special team there for the Westwood Redhawks with Amon Green. They had Christian Horn, the App State commit. Had a lot of talented guys there.